One ordinary afternoon, 3:30 p.m, Mrs. Cynthia Evans sat in the courtyard of her house, lit a cigarette, and watched the smoke dance in the orange light of the afternoon. She wasn't really attentive to the cigarette. It was the smoke that interested her eyes, the form of it, how it dispersed into the air, forming peculiar patterns that rose higher and finally vanished into nothingness. She didn't notice the light weight of the grey ashes on her old blue dress. It wasn't their beauty that she was interested in. The weightlessness of the ashes and smoke were equally beautiful and peculiar in their own ways. Rather, it was the finality of their existence that she was attentive of. The smoke's existence was salient, quick. It was absorbed into the air to become one and uniform with the wind. The ashes were ordained to fall onto her dress, to get scattered wherever the wind took them. The acquiescence they must belong to, the control they didn't have. And that was exactly how she felt at 3:45 p.m. in the courtyard of her home. She didn't wish to vanish away like the smoke, but she would much rather take the existential form of it, if she had to choose between the two. In her late 30s, Cynthia was someone who was continually searching for the finality of love, the truest, most conclusive form of it. She was tired of romances. They seemed so choreographed to her. That was to say, she wanted to leave her lover. She met him on one of those ordinary afternoons, though all afternoons were mundane and ordinary to Cynthia. That afternoon, many afternoons ago, she was at the museum, and while wandering aimlessly, staring at the mixtures of colours in the canvases, Cynthia momentarily forgot that she had lost her job, that she hadn't paid her bills, that she was a childless woman in her mid-30s, and that tonight she would be smoking lonely cigarettes to the resonance of her old records. On her way out of the museum, she saw him sitting at the corner of the entrance, watching the smoke dancing aimlessly in the air, and she felt herself gravitate towards him, or perhaps she could see herself in him, and thus felt connected. It was on her third visit that he spoke to her, that he made a proposal that she could not refuse. 3:55 p.m. Cynthia decided to look at the ashes, and then determined that she must move on. She didn't have the morals or luxury to vanish herself into thin air like the smoke. She must take the next step. Either that, or she could just remain where she was exactly right now and wait for him to come back. Wait for the familiar conversations, the familiar tears, and the familiar apologies. It was hard to leave him. It was hard to leave familiarity, and equally difficult to adapt to something new. But then nothing can ever stay new. It would all lead to familiarity. Even his promises. So many times he had apologized for hitting her, sworn that he would never again do such a thing. But it was in those moments that he was the one hit by familiarity, and he responded only by passing it on to her, physically, on the soft cheek of her face. At that moment, her heart would pound violently. The thought that one would do such a thing to a lover stabbed her mind. That was when she felt the hurt. She was damaged beyond repair, beyond the bitter tears that flowed from his eyes and hers, beyond the slamming sounds of the doors and the violent silence that hit her afterwards. Then, somewhere from the nothingness within her, a feeling of pity for him would slowly surge through her gut, creep up to her heart and engulf it. And then she would find herself embracing him within her arms when he came back to her. It was the familiarity of her endurance that was the issue. Or perhaps she couldn't deal with the dishonesty of her emotion. She knew it was the kaleidoscope of time that she wanted to be away from. 4:20 p.m. Cynthia found the courage to put out her cigarette, wipe the bitter tears from her face, wash the awful smell of cigarette from her fingers, and head to their room to pack. She had less than 21 minutes to decide what she wanted to bring with her and what to leave behind. She then regretted needing so much time to make the decision to leave him. Bus stop number 1559, Thomason Street. She needed to catch the 936 that would take her to the city. As she walked, she wondered about the new place, about where to go, about how to get away from the familiarity of his skin, the familiar weight of his body, the familiar darkness that his anger often exuded, the familiar warmth of his that she was often enveloped within. 4:40 p.m. 1 minute from the arrival of the 936, Cynthia looked in the direction of the bus. From a distance, she was yet to see her bus. Instead, she saw a figure that was at too great a distance to be recognizable, and somehow she knew it was him. His luminous being was approaching her. He was incandescently white and pure, like the transfiguration of Christ, and her mind froze momentarily. She knew familiarity had taken hold of her again, and she must break it. She must break it now. She still had time. All she had to do was to get up, signal the bus to stop, and jump into it. While holding that thought in her head, Cynthia sat at the bench of the bus stop, watched the bus pass by, and a new and familiar thought entered her head. Why didn't I get up?